Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for our Public Service Loan Forgiveness webinar. I will be getting started. I just want to give everyone about a minute to log on, and then I will get going. All right, let's get going. Once again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our PSLF webinar. My name is Selena Damian, and I am the Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson here at the DFPI. Let me start with some housekeeping items. Throughout the entire webinar, your video, microphone, and chat feature will be disabled. You can enter questions in the Q&A function, but please do not ask detailed or too detailed personal questions, since this is a public forum, and we will try to get to most questions, or to as many questions as possible, and we will be answering some live at the end of the webinar. This event is being recorded, and it will be available on our DFPI YouTube channel within the next few days. So we have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. It is my pleasure today to be here to talk to you about PSLF, and it is also my pleasure to be joined by Betsy Mayotte, who is the president and founder of the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, or TISLA. She is a national student loan expert and has helped student loan borrowers for over 20 years. Her and I recently partnered on a student loan webinar series, and you can find those webinars on our YouTube page as well. Next, please. So just briefly, some of DFPI's responsibilities. We are the state of California's Consumer Protection Agency, and we regulate companies of financial products to ensure compliance. This includes student loan servicers. We accept and we evaluate consumer complaints, and we can take enforcement and legal actions when these companies are not in compliance. We conduct education and outreach to enhance consumer awareness and to protect consumers from fraud and abuse. Next, please. So how much debt do we have in California? Well, we have 4 million borrowers that owe $141 billion of student loan debt. Most of that is federal debt. California has the highest number of enrolled college students at 2.58 million, and the average debt load of a California borrower is $37,000 with an average monthly payment of $203. The majority of debt is held by borrowers between the ages of 35 to 49 years old. It is also important to note that most of the 2/3 of the student loan debt is held by women. Student loan debt disproportionately impacts people of color, and the default rates are highest for Black women. In California, our default rate, it's not as high, but it's still at 7%. In the United States, borrowers owe $1.78 trillion of student loan debt, which is the second highest consumer debt category behind mortgages. Next, please. So to mitigate some of that debt and to help borrowers pay down the debt and then to protect borrowers from future harm, several states, including California, has passed state laws to protect borrowers. The California Student Borrower Bill of Rights, also known as Assembly Bill 376, AB 376, was passed in 2020, And what it does is it prohibits servicers from engaging in abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices and requires that they work in the best financial interest of borrowers. It requires that servicers provide borrowers with information and applications for income-driven repayment or IDR plans and other forms for federal benefits and protections. And this includes PSLF applications, TPD applications, or any other applications that a borrower is seeking. It establishes special protections for military borrowers, borrowers working in public service, older borrowers, and borrowers with disabilities. So servicers must train their staff to help these borrowers accordingly. It also protects borrowers from any negative consequences stemming from a sale, assignment, transfer, system conversion, or payment made by the borrower to the original student loan servicer. So this one right here, I do want to stress on the importance for borrowers with repayment starting back in October. Many borrowers, when they got back on repayment, realized that they had new servicers. So there were millions of loans that were transferred during the COVID pause. And in order to protect borrowers, so when a borrower got back into repayment, their loan should remain the same. Their repayment plan should remain the same. If you incurred any negative consequences, missing account history, missing IDR form or IDR application information, which we're seeing a lot of. So a borrower cannot incur a negative consequence as a result of transfers, which we saw millions happen during the pandemic. So this is really important that a borrower that their account remains the same. A borrower can file a complaint with the DFPI through our complaint portal. And then we can process those accordingly to your servicer. Again, and then there's the link for the AB 376. Next, please. And then briefly, before we get into the PSLF information, I want to just highlight four key terms: federal loans versus private loans. So federal loans are those that are made and funded directly by the U.S. Department of Education, and for those loans, the interest rates are fixed and they will not change unless a borrower consolidates. There's aggregate and annual limits on the loans, and your federal loan, your direct loan, can be subsidized or unsubsidized, which has to do with the interest accruing, but it is still a federal loan. And then you have your private loans that are made by a lender, such as a bank, credit union, a state agency, or even directly by your school. They don't have the same flexible repayment terms or forgiveness options offered by federal student loans. And those many times require an established credit record or cosigner, and they may have higher limits. So a borrower may have a mix of federal and private loans. And the information that we're going to be providing on PSLF is for borrowers with federal loans. And then one important thing to note, if you have a federal loan and you've refinanced it into a private loan, you cannot convert it back into a federal loan. I do get that question a lot. And then a lender versus a servicer for Department of Education for federal loans. Department of Education is your lender, and then student loan servicer is the borrower's main point of contact. That's the company that tracks your loans while you are in school. They send your bill every month. They collect and process payments, and then process any changes in repayment plans, deferments, forbearances, or other activities to prevent default. So the Bill of Rights applies to your servicer. A borrower may be transferred to several servicers throughout the life of the loan and may have more than one servicer. So that's important to know. Next, please. And then this is going to be a borrower with federal loans will have two different portals or places where they can manage their loans. You're going to have your main federal student aid or Department of Education portal. That's your studentaid.gov account. This is where you fill out your FAFSA. This is where you're doing all your, pretty much after you start repayment, this is the main portal. You can find information on your servicer there as well. You will find all your loan history, your loan status, and then loan servicer with links to your loan or to your servicer. These are the federal student loan servicers right now that are servicing loans. And then Mohila is going to be your PSLF servicer. Next, please. So public service loan forgiveness. So PSLF is a federal program that was created in 2007 to encourage individuals to enter and remain in public service. Under this program, forgiveness is granted after satisfying certain criteria for 10 years. As I mentioned, Mohila is the student loan servicer for all PSLF borrowers. And as of October 2023, 715,000 borrowers have received over $51 billion in PSLF. And here at DFPI, we have seen over $1 million in forgiveness with borrowers that we've worked with or helped with the process. So it is a program that is successful. They're making a lot of great changes to the program to make the process more efficient. And now I will hand it over to Betsy to get into the nitty-gritty of the requirements.
Thank you, Selena. And thank you, Slide Sorter. Okay, so PSLF gets kind of a bad rap, or it used to, as being overly complicated, and it really isn't. And part of the reason we're doing this webinar is to try to simplify things for people. So one of the things I always like to start with when I'm explaining the rules for PSLF is this slide that you see in front of you. If you don't remember anything else from this presentation, this is the slide that will do you best because it's going to answer 95% of your questions. So in order to get your loans, the balance of your loans forgiven under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, you have to meet all three of the requirements that you see in front of you at exactly the same time. So you have to make an eligible payment on an eligible loan while working for an eligible employer. And you have to do that 120 times. And again, the key is that all three of these things have to happen at exactly the same time. So you might have an eligible loan and be making what would be considered an eligible payment. But if you're not working for eligible employment at the time, that month is never going to count for PSLF. And you can mix and match these, excuse me, three criteria however you like. But the key is that all three of these boxes need to be checked in order for that month to count. So with that in mind, let's define what the right type of loan and right type of employment, etc. is. So let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so all federal direct loans are eligible for PSLF. That includes subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans. That includes Graduate Plus loans. It includes Parent Plus loans. It includes consolidation loans. If it's under the direct loan program, you don't have to do anything else for it to be considered an eligible loan for PSLF purposes. Now, there's another federal loan program called the FEL program, which stands for Federal Family Education Loan Program. Prior to 2010, the vast majority of federal student loans that were made under this FEL program. Where it gets a little confusing is that both the FEL program and the direct loan program have subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans. They both have Graduate Plus loans. They both have Parent Plus loans. And they both have consolidation loans. If you're not sure whether you have a direct loan or a FEL loan, the first thing to do is figure out when you took the loan out. Any Stafford, Graduate or Parent Plus or consolidation loan that was made on or after July 1st, 2010 is absolutely a direct loan because they stopped making FEL loans as of that date. But if you took loans out prior to July 1st of 2010, or you consolidated prior to July 1st, 2010, it could be either a FEL or a direct. Now, as I mentioned, direct loans, doesn't matter when they were made, are always potentially PSLF eligible. But if you have these FEL loans, you really need to consolidate, and preferably before December 31st of this year, to make them eligible for PSLF. Now, the reason that it's preferable that you consolidate a FEL loan by 12/31 for PSLF purposes is due to a temporary waiver that's in place. Normally, payments that you make on a FEL loan don't count for PSLF. Remember that slide we looked at a minute ago, where you have to make an eligible payment on an eligible loan, and a FEL loan's not an eligible loan, while working eligible employment. But because of this temporary waiver, anybody with a FEL loan that consolidates or submits a completed consolidation application by December 31st will potentially get credit for payments made on a FFEL loan, assuming that they met all the other PSLF eligibility criteria. But if you consolidate a FFEL loan after December 31st, you will not get PSLF credit for any activity on that FFEL loan. Now, I know this slide says that Parent Plus loans have to consolidate to apply for PSLF. That's not technically true. Most borrowers will benefit best. Most Parent Plus borrowers will benefit best if they consolidate for PSLF. And the reason for that, we're going to talk about more when we talk about eligible payment plans. But Parent Plus loans in and of themselves are technically eligible for PSLF. It's just because of the way the payment plans work that most Parent Plus borrowers really should consolidate to really benefit from the PSLF program, but it's technically not a requirement. If you have direct loans and you consolidate after December 31st, they're going to give you credit for a weighted average of the PSLF counts of the underlying loans. And I know that sounds really confusing, so let me try to give you an example to explain. Let's say you have $50,000 in undergraduate loans and $50,000 in graduate loans. And because you worked for an eligible employer in between your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree, currently your undergraduate loans have credit for 100 PSLF counts, and your graduate loans only have credit for 50. If you consolidate by December 31st, that consolidation loan will get credit for the 100, so that it will get the higher count. If you consolidate after December 31st, using that same example, the consolidation loan would end up getting credit for 75, which is the average between the 100 count and the 50 count of the underlying loans. So those of you with FFEL loans, super important that you consolidate by December 31st. Those of you that have direct loans, you might not have to consolidate at all, but if you have loans with different counts under your belt, it really would behoove you to consolidate by December 31st as well. And the only place to consolidate is at studentaid.gov. It doesn't cost you anything. The application is pretty simple. Now, private loans are never eligible for PSLF. Now, I want to make sure that we're clear. A lot of people, when they're talking about those FFEL loans, they call them private. They're not. They're federal. When I say private loan, I mean a true private loan. So maybe a loan you took out from Discover or Sallie Mae or Bank of America. If the loan shows up when you log into studentaid.gov, it's a federal loan. If the loan does not show up when you log into studentaid.gov, it is not a federal loan and therefore is not eligible for PSLF and can't be made eligible for PSLF. Next slide, please. All right, so eligible employment. This is where a lot of the myths are around PSLF. It does not matter at all what you do for a living. It doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't matter what your day-to-day activities are. What does matter is who you work for. So a qualifying PSLF employer is any government employer that's federal, state, local, or tribal. Now, you have to be, in most cases, you have to be working directly for that employer. That employer is the one that's issuing your W-2. That employer is the one that's issuing your paycheck. Contractors do not count for PSLF purposes. So you might walk into a government building every day, sit at a government desk, and answer a government phone. But if you're a contractor and your actual employer is a for-profit company, it's not going to count for PSLF. There is a small exception right now for medical professionals, mostly in California and Texas. If there is a state law that specifically prohibits the employer from hiring you directly, like there is for physicians in California and Texas, then you can now get PSLF credit. So the way it works in California and Texas is that nonprofit Hospitals are not allowed to hire physicians directly. So what they do is they create a for-profit arm of the hospital, and that's who employs the doctors. Because it's state law that requires this, those medical professionals can now pursue PSLF. And what they would do is get their PSLF form signed off on by the nonprofit arm. But those laws are very few and far between. The vast majority of borrowers, if you're not working directly for that eligible employer, it's not going to count. Now, the other type of employer that counts is any 501c3 organization. If you work for a 501c3, then that is absolutely a PSLF eligible employer, full stop. Now, there are other nonprofits that also count for PSLF, but only if their primary reason for being, their core mission, is to provide certain specified public services. Now, there is a finite list of what those services are. It's things like public health, public library services, public education, public law. You can find that list on the Department of Education's website, which is studentaid.gov. You can also find it on the TISLA website, which is freestudentloanadvice.org. You can find that list of specified public services. Again, just to clarify, if it's a 501c3, you don't have to worry about what if they meet that other secondary list. It's only if it's a nonprofit that's not a 501c3 do you need to check and see if their primary focus is on that list. I also want to point out that as far as working for a government employer, that includes if you're full-time in the military or the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. So just to reiterate, if you're working at least 30 hours a week for a government employer, a 501c3 nonprofit, in some cases other nonprofits, then that's considered qualifying employment for PSLF purposes. And again, it doesn't matter what you do. If, for example, you work for the City of Burbank school district, the teachers in that school district are just as eligible or potentially eligible for PSLF as the administrative assistant is, the principal, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, the groundskeepers. Because, again, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters who you work for. Next slide, please. So, just to reiterate, you do have to be working at least 30 hours a week. Now, you don't have to be working 30 hours a week for a single eligible employer. You could be working 15 hours for a government employer and 15 hours for a 501c3. That counts as long as the total is at least 30 hours a week. Volunteering does not count. It has to be paid employment. If you do have Parent Plus loans, it's the parent borrower who has to be working for the eligible employer, even if it's the child that's making the payments on the loan. They don't care who makes the payments. They care who's working the employment. And it has to be the parent borrower or the actual borrower of the loan. Not only do you have to be working for an eligible employer for every one of those 120 months that you need to get forgiveness of your balance, you also have to still be working for an eligible employer at the time you submit your final application for forgiveness. So you might, because of this webinar, say, oh my goodness, I actually already have 10 years under my belt from when I worked for the government between 2007 and 2017. You can definitely submit your proof of eligible employment now and it'll count, but you still have to be working for an eligible employer today when you're actually submitting that proof of the 120 months of eligible employment. If you're not, if you've since gone to the private sector, that's okay. You should still submit proof of your eligible employment, but you won't actually get forgiveness unless and until you go back to working for a PSLF eligible employer. So just to recap, so far we know what an eligible loan is. It's any direct loan, doesn't matter when that loan was made. FFEL loans can be made eligible by consolidating them. You don't have to consolidate by December 31st To get that FFEL loan to be eligible, but to get past credits, you do need to consolidate by December 31st. And we know what eligible employment is. Eligible employment is 30 hours a week for either a government employer, a 501c3 nonprofit, or in some cases, other non-501c3 nonprofits. Next slide, please. All right, so here's our last checkbox. What's an eligible payment? An eligible payment is any payment that's made on or after October 1st, 07. A payment prior to that date will never count for PSLF. That's because that's when the law was signed off on by former President Bush II. So you will never get credit for PSLF for any payment made prior to 10/1/07. Now, your payments don't have to be consecutive. You might go in and out of eligible employment. You might change your payment plans to one that's not an eligible plan. That's okay. But again, the payment, you don't have to have 120 consecutive eligible payments. You do have to, for it to count, you do have to make the full payment as shown on your bill. It used to be, up until recently, the payment also had to be made on time, which was as defined as within 15 days of the due date. That's actually no longer the case. They got rid of the whole on-time requirement effective it was permanently effective last fall. They sort of got rid of it during the COVID period. Anyway, speaking of COVID, the COVID period where many people weren't due for payments at all, from March of 2020 through August of this year, that absolutely counts for PSLF, even if you weren't making payments. You did, of course, still have to have a direct loan and be working at least 30 hours a week for an eligible employer for the COVID period to count. But as soon as you submit proof of that employment, they will count those COVID months. Now, in a little bit, I'm going to be talking about what's called the one-time income-driven plan adjustment. And that's going to count some periods of forbearance and deferment in the past. Normally, forbearance and deferment don't count. But in some cases, as you'll see when I get to that section in a little bit, they actually are going to count some past periods of forbearance and deferment. In-school deferment doesn't count. Being in your grace period never counts either, even under this one-time IDR adjustment. The other times that never count are periods when you're in default. There are going to be limited periods in the future, very limited, if you work towards resolving the default, that might count. But in general, any period that you were in default will not count. Now, once you get the loan out of default, which if you are in default, I recommend you look into something called the Fresh Start program to get yourself out of default quickly and with no additional penalties. Any future payments you make that fit the criteria will count for PSLF. And of course, the payment only counts if you're working at least 30 hours a week at a qualifying employer, and you have to be on a qualifying repayment plan. Next slide, please. All right. Most people are going to need to be on what we call an income-driven repayment plan for most, if not all, of their 120 payments in order to benefit from PSLF. Now, any income-driven plan counts. That includes income-based repayment, the pay-as-you-earn plan, what used to be called the repay plan, but is now called the save plan, and the income contingent repayment plan. They all count for PSLF as long as the payment was made on a direct loan while working for an eligible employer, and while you weren't in a default status or while you were in school. Now, mention about Parent Plus loans. As I mentioned before, Parent Plus loans are absolutely eligible for PSLF, and technically you don't need to consolidate them to make them eligible for PSLF, but it's kind of a catch-22, because the problem is that Parent Plus loans aren't eligible for any of these plans you see in front of you, except for the 10-year standard plan, which I want to talk more about in a second. So you can make a Parent Plus loan eligible for the income contingent repayment plan by consolidating them. And that's why a lot of people say that Parent Plus loans have to be consolidated to qualify for PSLF. Not technically true, but the vast majority of Parent Plus borrowers will need to consolidate to really benefit from it. Now, we don't really have time to go into detail about it, but there's actually a loophole right now that expires July of 2025 that can allow some Parent Plus borrowers to actually get access to the SAVE plan, which oftentimes is a lower cost plan than income contingent is. If you want details about that double consolidation loophole, we have them all spelled out as well as step-by-step instructions on the consolidation page on the TSLA website, which I believe is on the link to that is on the last slide of this presentation. Now, a quick mention about the 10-year standard repayment plan. Now, the 10-year standard repayment plan also counts for PSLF. But if you make 120 payments while you're on the 10-year standard plan, you're going to pay the loan off. So that's why the vast majority of people need to get on an income-driven plan for most, if not all, of their 120 payments to really benefit from it. If you want to see which payment plan is best for you, or even if PSLF is going to work out for you in the end, we strongly suggest that you go to the Department of Ed's website and use what's called the Loan Simulator tool. If you plug in your income information and family size, it's going to tell you what your payment's going to be, under all of these plans that you see in front of you. And more importantly, whether, how much it's going to cost you in the long run. And that's a great transition to another pointer I always like to make when I'm talking about PSLF. Whenever we're talking about PSLF or any other type of student loan forgiveness, people get all caught up in the word forgiveness, and I get that, and for the most part, that's rightly so. But the name of the game isn't forgiveness. The name of the game is paying the least amount out of pocket over time. And for some people, the way to achieve that is to actually not pursue PSLF, but to pay your loans off aggressively. If you're just starting at a PSLF eligible employer and you don't have a lot of years under your belt already, and your income is a lot higher than your loan balance, chances are you are going to spend the least amount over time by just paying your loans off aggressively rather than pursuing PSLF. But again, that loan simulator tool can really help you determine that if you're not sure. Next slide, please. All right, and I'm going to turn it back to Selena.
Hi, and thank you. All right, so getting started. So how do we start with the process? So many of you might already be on the PSLF track and have already used this, but really important, Betsy talked about the qualifying employer. So one of the ways to determine, or the most important way really to determine how, if your employer is qualified, is to use the employer search tool on the studentaid.gov site. So through this eligibility search tool, you will enter your employer's federal employee ID number, the FEIN, which is it's the federal, that's the keyword, okay? So it's your federal number. So for state employees, it's the number listed on the W-2. As you can see here, there's a screenshot. Even though we all work for, there's 200 state agencies, we will all have a different state employee ID number, and the agency will be Department of Social Services, DFPI, DBO, whatever it is. But we are all under the state of California and the same FEIN number. So any borrower, anyone, you don't even have to have an account or create one. You can log on, use your employer's FEIN number. Again, it's on your W-2 form. Enter the number and you will find information there. So once you enter the number, as you can see with what's on the screen right now, it will show either eligible. That means that it's already been screened and approved through Department of Education. Someone else has already applied for the program or is on track. It will show as undetermined. If it shows undetermined, it means that they just haven't reviewed anyone under that employer. Doesn't mean it doesn't qualify. So you want to still go ahead and apply. you may find ineligible, which means that the Department of Education has already evaluated the employer and determined that it doesn't qualify because it's a for-profit organization or some other disqualifying employer. So you would start there. And then once you see that your employer is qualified, again, make sure you have that FEIN number. You need to find out what type of loans you have, right? So you can log on to your studentaid.gov account. Betsy already explained which ones were qualifying and the different types of loans. So when you log on your dashboard, you'll see the loan breakdown. You can select view loans. Again, for FFEL loans, if the loan has the word FFEL in front of its listing, then it's a FFEL program loan. And then you consolidate your loans if necessary. And someone in the chat did ask, what is consolidation? Just real quick, consolidation is taking all your federal loans and converting them into one direct consolidation loan. So you would have one payment, one disbursement date, or disbursement date. Sometimes you will be consolidating loans that are subsidized and unsubsidized. So when you do consolidate, it's still considered one loan, but they do show as two loans. The only difference is in the subsidized and unsubsidized portion. So, but that's what that is, and that's different than refinancing, putting them all in one direct consolidation loan. There's a link to do the consolidation. Next, please. Once you find out that you do have your employers qualified or possibly undetermined, you would still want to go ahead with the process. And then you have the correct loans. If you've consolidated, whether you've consolidated or not, then you're going to jump on the PSLF help tool. So the help tool basically has the employer certification form. It's electronic or automated. So you pre-fill and you generate the form. So every time that you certify, so if you're a first-time borrower, you'll go on here, you'll start your initial application, and then once you're on the PSLF track, you will be also using the tool to keep recertifying. So if it's your first time, you're gonna jump on the tool, log on, and you will see no former employers certified. If you've used the help tool before and have certified before and it's been approved, you'll see all previous employers there, and you'll be able to just pick up and certify where you left off. So during the summer, FSA created a digital process now. So using DocuSign, which is a lot easier, because before you had to print, scan, send it to your employer, they needed to scan it back, send it to, or even mail it to FSA. Now they're doing everything electronically. So when you get on the tool, make sure that you have the correct email address for your authorizing official. I get these. I am not an authorized official for state employees. It's going to be your personnel analyst, HR person. It could even be your manager. It has to just be someone that has access to you and can confirm and verify that you are an employee. So if you work for a smaller nonprofit, it could be your manager, right? They're the ones that have all your records. So you just make sure you have the correct email. The person, the authorized official, will receive an email that looks like this from Federal Student Aid. And then they will be confirming that the information that you entered on the PSLF form, which are the dates and your just then for your basic information, and that they are that employer, their FEIN, they will be confirming that the information is accurate. The authorized official can make corrections on a form or reject the form, but you will be informed by email that the form was rejected or that a correction was made and that it was accepted. So when I've gotten them, I do send it back, but I also send an email directly to the employee, just to let them know that I send it back. But for state employees, it's going to be your personnel analyst. So the person that you submit your any like health request changes, any the 634s, your agency should let you know who your personnel assigned analyst is. There's more than one that works for, depending on the size of the agency. We get those emails here at the DFPI. We get them letting us know when there's been changes with personnel analysts. Next, please. And then this is the form. They are still accepting the actual forms for those of you that maybe don't feel comfortable, that just don't have access to the internet in that way. You can still submit the form. Just make sure that everything is filled out correctly. Make sure that that you keep copies of everything that you're mailing out. And uploading. So if you're maybe just uploading them to Mohila now, just the certifications, and you still want to use these are the forms. Make sure that it's just legible and that the dates are correct. Next, please. I do want to talk about a new program that was announced. It's a new regulation. It's a PSLF buyback program. So the buyback program, it allows for previously ineligible months to be bought for PSLF purposes. So this opportunity is only available if you have already made the 120 months of approved qualifying employment. So it's already approved. You have 120 payments. It's showing on the Mohila tracker or on your account. And then buying, if you have a few months, maybe scattered months of forbearance and deferment, which would result in forgiveness under PSLF, and they're not going to be covered under the IDR adjustment, because the adjustment, which Betsy will talk about in a second, does require 12 months or more. So if you have a few months, maybe 2-3 months within the 10 years that where you didn't make a payment, or something happened where you were switched, or maybe even if you did make a payment, but it doesn't, for some reason, it was a long time ago and you weren't giving credit for, you could go ahead and file an appeal with FSA, a complaint through us. But this option is probably going to be much easier for you to access the forgiveness. So under this program, it includes periods of school deferment, grace, and forbearance. So not grace, actually, that shouldn't be on there. But to utilize buyback, you must have 120 months showing as approved qualifying due to eligible employment. You must still have a balance on your loans, and pay the amount you would have paid had you been on an IDR plans during the months you are trying to buy back. So you'll apply, and there's a contract that you will do with FSA, and they will tell you how much you will have to pay for those months. Recent changes allow borrowers who feel their payment count is incorrect to request reconsideration of their application in certain circumstances. So once again, for this program, I know it says on their grace, but you can't buy back months during which your loan was in any of the followings: in school, in grace period, default, bankruptcy, or TPD monitoring. Okay, so you must have been just for regular forbearance, and then you buying back these months will result in you getting forgiveness, PSLF forgiveness. So this is a brand new program. I don't have anyone that has applied for it yet, but it is a really good opportunity for those that are really close and just have a few months missing of repayment. Next, please. And then the PSLF reconsideration option through FSA. So a borrower can submit a reconsideration request if they use the PSLF employer search and the employer status was returned as ineligible, but you have additional information showing your employer should be eligible. You received a notification from the PSLF servicer that your employer is ineligible, but again, you have information, or you disagree with the qualifying payment count you received in a letter from the servicer. You will need to submit any documentation that could support your case for reconsideration. Again, if it has to do with a few months of forbearance and deferment, you could qualify for those months, could qualify either through buyback, through the IDR adjustment, which Betsy will talk about, and but this option is available if you disagree with the finding. Next, please. So some PSLF takeaways: if you missed the waiver, which was back last year, and you're still employed with your qualifying employer, you can consolidate before the end of this year. Again, this is super important for those FEL borrowers. You don't want to lose credit for all past payments. So again, as Betsy mentioned, if you consolidate after January, you will be losing all your payment history count. So you will start at 0. If you are new to public service, you can apply to start tracking progress. So don't wait until you're 10 to apply, especially with the state. You move so many different agencies. So we recommend annually just certifying. That way you can keep track of your progress. Again, there's some confusion in the chat about the CARES. So all the months during the CARES Act forbearance, that's March of 2020 through September 30th of 2023. If you, even though you did not make a payment, you weren't required to, as long as you certify and you were with the qualifying employer, you will, those months will count towards PSLF. So that's 3.5 years, over 3.5 years of months that you will receive credit for if you certify. You can decline an in-school deferment on loans that are in repayment status and make qualifying payments while you are in school. So if you decide to go back to school, you can decline the in-school deferment to get credit. If you receive a new direct loan when you return to school, you won't be able to make PSLF payments on those loans until the end of the grace period. You can't receive benefit under both the teacher loan forgiveness and PSLF for the same period of teaching service. That was something that was only available during the waiver. PSLF is non-taxable under federal and state law through 2025, and then the one-time IDR adjustment may increase your PSLF count, and I'll hand it over to Betsy to talk about the adjustment.
Thanks, Selena. Make sure you check out the Q&A panel. There's a question specifically for DFPI in there. Okay, so the one-time account adjustment. I want to emphasize the one-time thing. This has never happened before, and I promise you it will never happen again. The reason I'm emphasizing this is because, as you're about to see, this one-time account adjustment is going to give a lot of people credit that they normally wouldn't get. But I don't want people to think that going forward that it could happen again, so they don't necessarily have to worry about following all the PSLF rules. That is not the case. Unless this one-time adjustment is going to give you immediate forgiveness, you 1,000% need to be on an income-driven plan and have a direct loan from now going forward to continue to accrue any future PSLF payments. Now, with that said, let's talk about this awesome adjustment. So essentially what they're doing is they're giving people credit for past periods that they could have been on an income-driven plan, but weren't. Maybe they weren't because they didn't know about it. Maybe they weren't because their servicer didn't give them great information. Whatever reason that they weren't on an income-driven plan. They're giving everybody, all 47 million federal student loan borrowers, the benefit of the doubt, and they're going to give people credit for past periods of payment towards the 20 or 25 years that you would need to get forgiveness under the income-driven plans. Now, it doesn't matter what payment plan you were on. If you were on standard consolidation plan or the graduated repayment or extended repayment, which none of those normally count for either PSLF or the income-driven plan forgiveness, they're going to give you credit for it. Now, why this is exciting for PSLF borrowers is because, remember, an eligible payment for PSLF purposes is one made under an income-driven plan. So if they're going to be recategorizing a payment that normally wouldn't have been eligible under IDR as an IDR payment, that means you can also get credit for it for PSLF, assuming that you're meeting the other PSLF criteria. Most importantly, that you were working eligible employment at the time of that particular month that they're going to give you credit for. So not only are they giving people credit for any period of repayment, regardless of what payment plan you're on, they're also going to give people credit towards certain deferments and forbearances. As Selena mentioned, if you had what they deem to be quote unquote excessive forbearance, and I'm going to define that in a minute, they'll also give you credit for those periods of forbearance. Now, excessive forbearance is defined as you had at least 12 consecutive months of forbearance or a total over the life of your loan of 36 months or more. They're going to count those as income-driven plan payments once they do the one-time account adjustment. They're also going to count, with the exception of in-school periods, they're going to count any deferment prior to 2013, and they're going to count some deferments after 2013. That includes economic hardship deferment, cancer treatment deferment, and military deferment are ones that they're going to count going forward across the board, and definitely after 2013. And again, pre-2013, they're counting all periods of deferment other than periods where you were in an in-school deferment or your grace period. They're still not counting periods of default. They're still not counting periods where the loan might have been in a bankruptcy status. But other than that, they're counting pretty much everything else. Now, there are a lot of people, in fact, there's already been 900,000 people that this one-time account adjustment is going to result in immediate forgiveness. And that's for people who have, once they do the count, it's going to show that they either have 240, which is 20 years, or 300 payments, which is 25 years under their belt. Now, as you can see from the slide in front of you, if you have only undergraduate loans, they're going to do it once you hit the 240 count, if the adjustment gets you there right off the bat. If you have parent plus loans or consolidation loans that contain parent plus loans, they're going to do it at 25 years. If you have graduate loans and you're currently, as we speak, on the pay-as-you-earn program, they're going to do it in 20 years. And if you have graduate loans and you're not currently on the pay-as-you-earn program, it's going to be 25. Now, just to be clear, if the adjustment doesn't get you to the 20 or 25 years, you will have to be on an income-driven plan to accrue the rest of your payments for IDR forgiveness or PSLF forgiveness, for that matter. And then whatever the forgiveness timeline will depend on the plan that you're on. The other thing I want to make super clear is that PSLF is still 10 years. So if this IDR forgiveness, if this IDR income-driven plan waiver gives you an additional 5 years of PSLF payments, and that puts you over the 120, you'll get forgiveness right away. Next slide, please. Now, there's no application for this adjustment. If you have a federal direct loan, they are doing the adjustment on your account. They're doing it in batches. They started back in September. They're doing the batches approximately every 2 months, and they anticipate being done by around this time next year. We're talking about 40 million accounts they're working on, and they're only about 1 million in. So, as I like to say, people are going to have to put their patience pants on. There's no way to tell where you are in the queue. There's no way to get you towards the front of the queue. I promise you that. They do seem to be focusing on, starting with the people for whom the adjustment's going to give them immediate forgiveness, and then they're going to go on from there. Again, there's no application. It'll just happen. You'll get notification when it does. And again, as I mentioned, they're counting any period of repayment that wasn't default, regardless of which plan you were on. They're going back as far back as 1994. Now, remember that PSLF payments only count after October of 2007, but for those of you that might be pursuing forgiveness under the IDR plans and are what we call a long hauler, you've been paying on your loan for decades, it's good to know that they're actually going back to July of 1994 as far as how far back they're counting. Next slide, please. Looks like I'm getting ahead of myself. As I mentioned, they're going back to 1994 as far as IDR forgiveness goes. PSLF still only goes back to October of 2007. Everybody with a direct loan is automatically going to get this adjustment sometime between now and this time next year. If the number of payments you made after the adjustment ends up being more than what was needed for forgiveness, and assuming that the overage was not made prior to a consolidation, they will automatically refund you the difference. Selena and I have both seen borrowers that have received unexpected and automatic forgiveness, and very fat refunds too, which is really nice to see. But again, if you have to consolidate, or if you do consolidate to get access to the waiver or to get the higher count, anything pre-consolidation is never refunded. Next slide, please. Now it's back to Selena.
Thank you. So one thing that I want everyone to be aware of, and just with everything going on with student loans and everything we're hearing on the media, all the issues we're having where borrowers can't get through to their servicers, we're having scammers, or in some cases just like doc prep companies that are reaching out to borrowers via text, via phone calls, via very official looking letters. They're offering consolidation. They're offering to help you with student loan, with the PSLF process, offering forgiveness, saying that they can grant forgiveness. Just be prepared. It's very important that you know the name of your student loan servicer or servicers. Verify the information and research the company. If someone reaches out to you and the name you're not sure, just Google the name and look up scam, and you'll see reviews, you'll see their sites. They might just be a company that does help borrowers process documents. Never give out your login information or passwords, or fill out sign any sort of official document. Do not subscribe to any monthly service or sign a contract. I've had borrowers reach out to me that have filled out power of attorney to these companies where they can pretty much act on their behalf, and all they're doing is processing these applications. So what you need to do is remember that there's nothing a company can do for you that you can't do on your own for free, or that we can assist you with. Loan servicers and the federal government typically are not calling you 4 or 5 times a day from different phone numbers. If a number keeps calling you, let them leave a message, listen to the message, log on to your website, to your servicer website, and see if there's any messages there or communication through there. If someone is offering special access, or there's a sense of urgency, like you need to act now, you need to, don't miss out now, don't do it. Don't provide any information. Many times it's a subscription service where you have to pay $300 a month for so many months. They'll lock you into these long-term contracts. So it's very important that you know who these servicers are, who these companies are. File a complaint. If you have been a victim of fraud, you can file a complaint with us or with the Federal Trade Commission. And next slide, please. Looks like we do have, well, we have about 2 minutes left for questions. I do see some in the queue. Betsy, do you have any that you see that we could answer that would be just helpful for the entire group?
We've had lots of questions, and they've been really good questions. There's been a couple I haven't quite understood. I think, one question we had was, if I have, can Parent Plus loans be consolidated with non-Parent Plus loans if there's 2 different borrowers? And I like that question a lot, because I think it's a good opportunity for us to clarify a couple different points for that. I don't know if you want me to take that, or if you want to take it.
Go ahead.
So Parent Plus loans can absolutely be consolidated with other direct loans, such as Stafford loans or Graduate Plus loans, or maybe even another consolidation, but only if all of those loans are owed by the same borrower. You can never consolidate someone else's loans into your own loans without leaving the federal program. And of course, if you leave the federal program, PSLF is permanently off the table. So, let's say mom has Parent Plus loans and Junior has their own loans, and Junior's the one working for a PSLF eligible employer and wants to be able to consolidate mom's Parent Plus loans with his. That cannot be done. There's a great question here, Selena, about whether PSLF is taxed.
Not through 2025 on the federal or state level. So I believe there's only a few states that do tax it still, but not California. I did see a few questions on, so with repayment starting, and we should have mentioned it, but it's okay, we're mentioning it now. If your loan was placed on forbearance automatically by the servicer, you should still be receiving PSLF credit. So they have placed some loans, some accounts on just automatic forbearance while they're correcting errors, while they're processing applications. You may see that your loan is like on forbearance through next year. FSA Department of Ed has said that they will be giving credit towards PSLF for those accounts that were placed on forbearance. So again, to mitigate any harm resulting from the repayment restart. So again, that's what's super important, that you do certify. That way you can see where you are, you can see where those gaps in your months are, where you're missing credit, and then they should go back, they should be giving you credit for that. So just really important that you apply early just to stay on track and see where you are with your count. And with that, I think, yeah, we've hit the 12 o'clock mark. Please email me. You can email me. Here's our information. You can email Betsy if you do have more specific questions. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you to our outreach team, and everyone have a great rest of your year and great holidays, and good luck with your PSLF. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.